I grew up rough. My old man wasn't around much, and when he was, it was nothing but trouble. Mom did her best, but let's be real, raising 2 kids on her own with barely enough to scrape by, it wasn't easy. I knew from a young age I wasn't gonna be one of those guys who just sat around waiting for a handout. I worked my ass off, didn't care about looking fancy or making friends. All I wanted was to get out, to make something of myself. And I did. By the time I was 28, I was an accountant at a mid-level firm. Nothing huge, but it paid the bills. I moved up pretty quick. Hard work, long hours, and a little luck got me into the right circles. People noticed. Maybe it helped that I didn't act like I had anything to prove. That attitude put me in a different league than some of the other guys, who were more interested in playing office politics than doing the work. But I wasn't about that. I was about the grind. Then I met Abigail. She was a different kind of trouble. Beautiful, no doubt. Had this way about her that pulled you in. Soft-spoken, but there was this fire behind those eyes. She wasn't like any of the women I'd known before. We hit it off pretty fast, felt like we were on the same wavelength from day one. She had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Hell, for a while, it was like everything in my life just clicked into place. We were married within 2 years. Maybe too soon, but it felt right at the time. Maybe that's the problem with people like me, you get caught up in the moment, and then it's too late to see the cracks before they get too big. Abigail was different from the girls I was used to. She had a past, but who doesn't, right? She had a way of opening up just enough to keep you interested, but never really letting you all the way in. But that was part of her charm, I guess. She'd talk about her past like it was no big deal, but I could tell it bothered her, some of it anyway. She'd make little jokes about being complicated or difficult to understand, but I didn't mind. I thought I could handle it. I wanted to. Still, as time went on, something changed. The first signs were small, little things like her getting distant, then coming back all sweet and affectionate like nothing had happened. I'd chalk it up to her being busy with work or just needing space. I didn't think much of it. But then came the talk about open marriages. I'll be honest, I wasn't ready for that one. She was always full of surprises, but that one threw me off. She said it so casually, like it was a normal conversation to have. Like, hey, we should try an open marriage, for fun. I didn't know what to say at first. I thought it was a joke, but when I saw the serious look on her face, I realized it wasn't. I told her I wasn't interested. I was still stuck on the idea of loyalty. Maybe I was naive, but I thought loyalty meant something. In her world, though, it seemed like it didn't. And the more we talked about it, the more I realized how much we'd drifted apart. I thought it was just a phase she was going through, but I was wrong. She was serious. And it wasn't long before I started questioning everything about us. I wish I could say I handled it better, but I didn't. I wasn't ready for the emotional manipulation that started creeping into our relationship. The lies. The late nights out. The sudden disappearances. She always had a reason, always had a story. But something told me she wasn't telling me the full truth. It wasn't just about the open marriage anymore. It was the constant tension, the feeling that I was being pushed into something I wasn't comfortable with. She'd change the subject whenever I tried to get real with her, and slowly, I realized that maybe she wasn't the person I thought she was. And that scared me. But I wasn't the only one getting sucked into things. That's when Samantha came into the picture. I met Samantha at one of those company events. You know the type: cocktails, expensive suits, and fake smiles. I wasn't really paying attention at first. I mean, I was used to the business crowd, the fancy people trying to network and climb their own ladders. But when I turned to look around, I saw her standing across the room. It wasn't just her beauty that caught my eye, it was the way she carried herself. She had this energy, like she was on a different level, and everyone else just seemed to fade into the background when she was in the room. Samantha was married to Gerald SMI, a guy who had made his name in real estate. He was the definition of arrogant, a big shot who thought the world owed him everything. And while I didn't particularly like him, there was something about Samantha that made it hard to ignore her. She wasn't like the other women there. She didn't try too hard. She was smooth, confident, and in control, but not in a way that made you feel small. It was almost magnetic. At first, I figured she was just another high society type, but over time, we started talking more. Conversations started casual, nothing too deep. But every time we spoke, it felt like there was more to her than she let on. I wasn't trying to make anything happen. At least, that's what I told myself. But there was an undeniable pull. I didn't really think much about it at first. It was just friendly conversation. But after a few months, I found myself running into her more often. And every time we talked, it felt like I knew her better. One evening, we ended up at the same event again, this time at a mutual friend's place. A bunch of us were celebrating Joe's birthday. He was one of the few people who could actually make Gerald laugh, so it was kind of a rare moment for the group. I was already feeling off about Abigail by then, the tension in our relationship growing with every passing day. But that night, something shifted. Joe had always been a little reckless, a thrill seeker, and when he suggested we all go skydiving, everyone jumped at the idea. Gerald, of course, had to play it cool and act like he didn't care. But Samantha, she was excited. She had a spark in her eyes that night, something I hadn't seen before. I didn't realize how bad things were about to get. But then, that skydiving trip. The whole thing turned out to be a nightmare. Joe didn't come back. The investigation afterward hit like a gut punch. Joe was dead. And it wasn't just an accident. Someone had tampered with his parachute. We all knew what that meant, but no one dared to say it out loud at first. Everyone had their theories. Some people thought it could have been a freak accident. Others suspected sabotage. As the investigation went on, it became clear that something more sinister was at play. Samantha and Gerald were at the center of it all. The rumors started swirling. Gerald had a lot to gain financially from Joe's death. It was a mess. The whispers and the looks we exchanged when we were all together spoke volumes. No one knew exactly what happened, but it was obvious there was more to it than anyone was letting on. I started to notice things, little details that didn't sit right. Like how calm Gerald was after Joe died, or how Samantha's mood shifted. But the more I dug into it, the more I realized I wasn't just tangled in their mess. I was tangled in my own. Abigail, my wife, had a history with Joe. A history that neither of us had ever fully talked about. And as the pieces started to fall into place, I had to face a truth that tore me apart. It was a few days after Joe's funeral when the cracks in everything really started to show. My head was a mess. My wife was acting strange, cold and distant one minute, affectionate the next. She kept brushing off my questions about Joe's death and the investigation. Every time I tried to dig a little deeper, she'd change the subject or get defensive. Something didn't sit right. Then one night, I found a message on her phone. It was from Joe. And when I read it, my heart sank. The tone of the messages was, well, intimate. Way too intimate. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was there. Joe had been more than a friend to her. They'd been having an affair. I confronted Abigail that night. I didn't give her a chance to explain herself. I just exploded. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told her everything I had found, every single text, every word. Her face went pale as a ghost, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, looking like she was about to collapse. When she finally spoke, she tried to explain herself, but all I could hear were lies. She told me how it had been a one-time thing at first, how she was confused and lonely, how she never meant for it to go this far. But I wasn't buying it. She told me everything I wanted to hear, but it felt empty, like she was saying what she thought I needed to hear to fix everything. It was the same manipulation I'd been getting for months. I didn't want to hear her excuses. The truth was, I had been blind. I had been so focused on keeping my head down and working hard that I never saw what was happening in front of me. The infidelity, the lies, the distance between us, it had all been there. And now, with Joe's death looming over us, it was all crashing down. But that wasn't even the worst part. I found out that Abigail wasn't just having an affair with Joe. She was connected to Gerald, too. There was more to the story than I could have ever imagined. It turned out that Abigail had been working with Gerald to eliminate Samantha from the picture. I didn't understand it at first, but the pieces started to fall together. Gerald had been planning to take over some of Joe's properties, and Abigail was right there, helping him make it happen. She'd convinced herself that if Samantha was out of the picture, she could get her hands on Joe's share of the wealth. The whole thing was like a twisted game of chess. It was hard to swallow. My wife had been secretly conspiring with Gerald, and not just against Joe but against Samantha as well. She was playing both sides, using me to cover up her own twisted agenda. And for what? Money. Power. Her own selfish needs. I felt like a fool. The worst part was that Abigail hadn't just been working with Gerald for financial gain. She had been using me as a pawn in their game. She knew I was loyal, knew I'd never question her decisions, and she took full advantage of that. She used my trust as a weapon, and I was too blind to see it. But it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt the most, it was the realization that I didn't know the woman I had married. She wasn't the person I thought she was. She had changed, and so had I. And then there was Samantha. My connection with her had been growing deeper over time, especially after Joe's tragic death. We were both grieving, and in a strange way, that shared grief brought us closer. She wasn't like Abigail. She wasn't pretending to be something she wasn't. She was raw, honest, and she made me feel seen in ways I hadn't felt in years. It was complicated. I knew it was wrong to get involved with someone who was already married, but the truth was, I wasn't thinking straight. Samantha didn't care about the drama that followed Joe's death. She cared about what was real, what was right in front of us. And as much as I wanted to push her away, to stay loyal to my wife, I found myself growing more and more attached to her. The attraction between us was undeniable. But that didn't make things any easier. I wish I could say that I handled it better. But I didn't. Every day, the weight of what I had discovered about Abigail and her twisted alliance with Gerald felt like a lead ball in my stomach. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. The woman I had built my life around, the one I had trusted more than anything, turned out to be nothing but a manipulative liar. I tried to talk to her, tried to get some sort of clarity, but every conversation felt like a trap. She'd apologize, say all the right things, but there was no sincerity in her words. I could see it in her eyes. She didn't regret a thing. The only thing she regretted was getting caught. In the midst of all this, I found myself reaching out to Samantha more. She seemed to be the only one who understood what I was going through, the only one who wasn't playing games. It wasn't just the grief over Joe's death that kept us talking, it was something else, something deeper. We spent hours on the phone, pouring our hearts out to each other. It felt real. She made me feel like I wasn't crazy for questioning everything. Like maybe there was something worth saving if I was willing to take a chance. But there was a problem. Samantha was still married to Gerald. As much as I tried to ignore it, that fact loomed over us. It didn't stop me from wanting her. It didn't stop her from wanting me either. Every time we were together, I could feel the tension between us, the magnetic pull that neither of us could resist. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't help it. She wasn't like Abigail. She didn't lie or manipulate. She was just herself. And honestly, that's what drew me in. That honesty. I couldn't even remember the last time I had felt like that in my own marriage. Abigail had turned into a stranger to me. A woman who would smile and pretend everything was fine, even though her world was crumbling around her. She was more concerned with keeping up appearances than actually facing the truth. But every time I saw Samantha, I saw something different. She wasn't perfect, but she was real. She was vulnerable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was seeing someone for who they truly were. I hadn't felt that in years. Of course, that made everything even messier. Gerald wasn't a fool. He saw the way Samantha and I interacted, the way we seemed to gravitate toward each other. The tension between the two of us was so thick that even he could sense it. But he wasn't worried about that. He was worried about his control over her, his hold on the situation. He needed her in his life for business, for the power she brought. He didn't care that she wasn't happy. That's when I started noticing the cracks in their marriage, too. It wasn't just me and Samantha. It was Gerald, too. He was a businessman first, a husband second. He saw her as nothing more than a commodity to manipulate. He didn't care about her feelings. Hell, he didn't even care about Joe's death. He only cared about keeping his empire intact. And that's when things started to shift. The whole situation became a game. A game I was now fully caught up in. Gerald wasn't going to let me get too close to Samantha without making a move. And Abigail? Well, she wasn't as blind as I thought. She knew something was going on between Samantha and me. She started turning up the heat, trying to control me even more, even though everything between us was falling apart. The more I got involved with Samantha, the more my own world started unraveling. Every decision felt like I was digging a deeper hole, but I couldn't stop. I was in too deep now. I wanted to believe that there was something real between me and Samantha. But I knew deep down that I was making the same mistakes I had made with Abigail. I was letting my emotions cloud my judgment. The worst part? I wasn't the only one playing the game. Abigail was playing her own cards. And she was good. She started manipulating me in ways I never saw coming. She knew how to get to me, how to make me doubt myself. She played the victim, made me feel guilty for everything that had happened. And I fell for it. But what Abigail didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I wasn't just a pawn anymore. I was the one pulling the strings now. The more I watched them both, the more I realized I was in control of the situation. All I had to do was make the right moves, and I could get exactly what I wanted. The thought of taking control, of finally being the one to decide how things played out, was intoxicating. I could feel myself slipping deeper into this web of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. But at the same time, it felt like freedom. Like for once in my life, I could be the one who called the shots. I had no idea just how far I was willing to go though. The days blurred together. It felt like I was living in a constant state of tension, always looking over my shoulder, always calculating the next move. But the thing about being in the middle of a web of lies is that eventually, you forget who's spinning them and who's getting caught in them. The more I interacted with Abigail, the more I realized just how far she would go to keep control over me. She knew me better than anyone else, and she was starting to exploit that. She played on my guilt, made me feel like I was the one ruining everything, even though she was the one who'd betrayed me first. She knew just the right buttons to push, the perfect emotional traps to set. It was like I was trapped in a game of chess where every move I made only made things worse. Then there was Samantha. Every time I saw her, I felt like I was on the edge of something real, something that could pull me out of the darkness. But the closer I got to her, the messier everything became. Gerald was still in the picture, still hovering like a shadow over her, making his demands, controlling her every move. And honestly, I wasn't in a better position. I was married to Abigail, a woman who had her own agenda and wasn't about to let me go without a fight. But Samantha wasn't willing to let me go either. And neither of us had the courage to walk away from what we were doing. I tried to keep things separate. I told myself I could manage it all, my marriage, my relationship with Samantha, the business with Gerald and Abigail, the constant tension from every direction. But that was a lie. I wasn't managing anything. I was barely holding it all together. One night, things took a turn. Samantha and I had been texting all day, and when she suggested we meet up, I couldn't resist. She had this way of making me feel like I was the only person who mattered, and in that moment, that's all I wanted. To feel like I was enough for someone. We met at a bar. She was dressed casually, but even in that, she looked flawless. We sat at a corner booth, and I could feel the air between us charged with something unspoken. We talked about Joe, about the investigation, about the mess our lives had become. But we both knew that wasn't the real reason we were there. We were there because we were drawn to each other, because we were tired of the lies and the manipulation. I told her everything about Abigail, about her affair with Joe, the conspiracy with Gerald, everything. Samantha listened quietly, her eyes never leaving mine. She didn't judge me. She didn't make me feel like I was a bad person. She just let me speak, and for the first time in a long time, I felt heard. Then, without saying much, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't passionate or frantic, but it was real. It felt like everything else fell away in that moment. There was no Abigail, no Gerald, no web of lies. There was just us. But just as quickly as it had started, I pulled away. My head was spinning. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to throw everything away. But Samantha wasn't backing down. She grabbed my hand and told me that we couldn't keep pretending, that we both knew what was happening, that it was time to stop pretending we were just friends. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, the weight of it all crashing down on me. For the first time, I realized that I was too far gone. I wasn't in control anymore. Neither of us were. That's when I knew I had to make a choice. I went home that night, and everything felt different. I walked into the house, and Abigail was there, sitting in the living room, waiting for me. She knew. She had known about my meeting with Samantha before I even got back. She'd been watching me, trying to catch me in the act. I didn't even try to lie. I told her the truth, how I was done with the lies, how I wasn't going to keep pretending anymore. I told her that I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic relationship any longer. Abigail didn't cry. She didn't beg. Instead, she smiled. It was a strange, empty smile, like she was relieved to finally see the end of it. She told me that she had already made plans, that she was moving forward, and that I was just in the way of her next step. The reality hit me then. She had already decided what her next move would be. She'd been planning her escape, just like I had been. And now, it was my turn to face the consequences of everything I had done. But the real shock came when she told me something I wasn't expecting. She confessed that she had been having another affair. Not with Joe, no, this one was different. This time, it was someone I knew. Someone close to me. She didn't tell me who, but I didn't need to ask. I knew. It was Gerald. Abigail and Gerald had been working together all along. She had been setting me up for a fall. She was never going to let me leave her. Not until she had everything she wanted, everything I had worked for. I stood there in that moment, realizing how much of a fool I had been. The entire time, I had been playing their game, thinking I had control. But the truth was, I had lost long ago. I was just too blind to see it. Now, with everything in chaos, I had to make the hardest choice of all. Would I continue down this path of destruction, letting Abigail and Gerald take everything from me? Or would I finally break free, even if it meant losing everything else? The answer was clear, but the road ahead was anything but easy. The next few days felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Abigail's confession about her affair with Gerald hit me harder than I expected. She hadn't just betrayed me with Joe. She had been playing me like a fool, pretending to be the victim, pretending she was the one who had been wronged. In reality, she'd been working with Gerald the entire time, using me, manipulating me, and dragging me into their twisted little game. I thought I was done with her. I thought I was ready to walk away from everything, my marriage, my life as I knew it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. I wasn't just leaving Abigail behind. I was leaving everything. The life I had built, the career I'd worked so hard for, all of it would be gone. If I went through with it, I'd be walking away from everything I knew. And Samantha? As much as I wanted to be with her, as much as I knew I was drawn to her in ways I couldn't explain, the situation with her was just as complicated. Gerald wasn't going to let her go. She had no real way out unless she made a move of her own. I couldn't just waltz into her life and sweep her away without thinking about the consequences. I had already learned that lesson the hard way with Abigail. I knew one thing though, if I wanted out, if I wanted to take control of my own fate, I had to act fast. And that meant I had to confront Gerald. I tracked him down at one of his usual spots, a high-end bar that he liked to frequent. It was the kind of place where people who were looking for power and influence met to rub elbows. I didn't care about that. I was there for something much bigger. When I walked in, he didn't see me right away. I stood off to the side for a moment, just watching him. He was deep in conversation with some investors, acting like the king of the world. Gerald wasn't just arrogant, he was delusional, believing that money and power made him untouchable. It was sickening. He couldn't even see the cracks forming in his own empire. I walked up to him and stood there for a moment, letting the tension between us simmer. I could feel his eyes flick to me, sizing me up, trying to figure out what I was doing there. But he didn't say anything. He just took a sip of his drink and waited for me to speak. "Gerald," I said, my voice low but firm. "I think we need to talk." He raised an eyebrow, but he didn't seem fazed. "About what?" he asked, barely looking at me. I leaned in a little closer, making sure he could hear the quiet anger in my tone. "About Abigail. About Joe. And about this whole damn mess you've created." That got his attention. His expression shifted, the mask of confidence slipping for just a second. He was clearly caught off guard, but he recovered quickly. "What do you think you're going to do about it?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm not here to play your games anymore," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I know what you and Abigail have been up to. I know she's been feeding you information. I know you two were planning to screw over Samantha and take everything for yourselves." Gerald smirked, as though this was all just part of the show. "You think I care about that woman? Samantha? She's just a means to an end. I've been playing her, just like I've been playing you. I felt my blood boil. You're a coward, I spat, stepping closer to him. You think you can just control everything, that you can take whatever you want without consequences. But you're wrong. You're not going to get away with this. Gerald's smirk faded, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He took a step back, as though weighing his options. And what exactly are you going to do about it, Robert? He asked, his voice suddenly cold. I'm not going to let you destroy everything for your own gain, I said, the words coming out with more conviction than I expected. I'm not going to stand by and let you ruin Samantha's life, and I'm not going to let you drag me down any further. Gerald didn't say anything for a long moment. The silence stretched between us like a thick, suffocating fog. Then finally he spoke, his voice low and dangerous. You're making a big mistake, Robert, he warned. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. You think you can walk away from me? From everything we've built together? You think you can just leave without facing the consequences? I stared him down, refusing to back down. I don't care about your empire, Gerald. I don't care about your money. I care about what's right. And you're not going to get away with this. For a moment, I thought he might lunge at me, but instead, he just turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty space between us. The tension was thick in the air, and I knew that things were only going to get more complicated from here. But I didn't care. I had made my choice. I was done playing by their rules. I wasn't going to let Abigail and Gerald dictate my life anymore. I wasn't going to sit by and watch them destroy everything I held dear. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were too many people involved, too many lies and manipulations. But I also knew one thing, I wasn't going to let them win. As I left the bar that night, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't had in a long time. I didn't know exactly what was coming next, but for the first time, I felt like I was finally in control. The game was on. And I wasn't going to back down without a fight. The tension between me, Abigail, and Gerald wasn't just in the air anymore, it was in everything we did. I could feel the weight of it every time I came home to the house we shared, the silence hanging like a cloud between us. Abigail's silence wasn't soft, it was suffocating. She was angry, and I could tell she was plotting her next move. She wasn't the kind of woman to let go easily. She'd played me before, and I knew she'd try to do it again. But now, I was awake. I saw her for who she really was. WRLX, February 24, 2025, 2007. That night, after my confrontation with Gerald at the bar, I thought I had made some progress. I thought I had put my foot down, that I had made it clear I was no longer going to be part of their game. But the next few days? They were the kind of days where you feel like you're drowning, but no one can hear you scream. The atmosphere in the house got colder. Abigail was more distant than ever, and her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, never left me. She didn't need to speak. I could feel it. The resentment, the anger, the desperation. She was waiting for me to break, to fall back into line, to apologize. But I didn't. I found myself spending more time at the office, pretending to be focused on work, but really, I was just trying to get away from everything. I couldn't be home without the constant reminder of how messed up everything had become. And Samantha, she was always there in my mind, even when I wasn't with her. She had become the one bright spot in this tangled mess, but I couldn't shake the feeling that her situation was just as dire. Gerald had a hold on her. I knew that much. And as much as I wanted to fight for her, I couldn't ignore the fact that everything I was doing, every move I made, was just drawing me further into this nightmare. The phone call came 2 days later. I didn't expect it, but somehow, I knew it was coming. It was Gerald. He wasn't calling to make small talk, that's for sure. His tone was icy, clipped, he was in control. The same way he always was. Robert, he said, his voice low, measured. We need to have a serious conversation. I didn't say anything at first. Part of me wanted to hang up. But I knew better. If there was one thing I'd learned in the past few weeks, it was that avoiding confrontation only made it worse. I'm listening, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, despite the anger bubbling inside me. Gerald let out a slow, almost amused sigh. You think you can just walk away from all of this? From me? From Abigail? You really think you can just pick up your little pieces and leave without consequences? I bit down on my lip, but I didn't back down. I'm done playing your game, Gerald. I've had enough. Good luck with that, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But here's the thing. You and I both know that nothing's ever that simple. If you think for a second that you can just waltz out of here without consequences, you're wrong. And if you think Samantha is going to get away without facing the fallout for all of this, you're wrong too. My heart sank. I knew exactly what he was implying. Leave Samantha out of this, I snapped, my anger taking over. Oh, but I can't, Gerald said, his voice suddenly colder, more threatening. She's part of the problem, Robert. And if you think I'm going to let you destroy everything I've built, you've got another thing coming. You want to walk away from this? Fine. But don't expect to do it without me making sure you lose everything. Your career, your reputation. Everything. And as for Samantha, well, I'll make sure she gets what's coming to her too. I stood there, frozen. Every word he said was like a punch to the gut. Gerald wasn't just threatening me, he was threatening to destroy everything I had left. Everything I'd worked for, everything I cared about. He had the power to make things disappear with just a few phone calls, and I knew it. For the first time since all this started, I felt real fear. But I couldn't let him see that. Not now. You're not going to win, I said, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. I'm done. And if you think you can keep threatening people to get what you want, you're wrong. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought he might hang up. But then he spoke again, and the words were colder than before. Fine. We'll see how long that resolve lasts, Robert. But don't forget, every move you make from here on out will have consequences. And you're not the only one who can play dirty. And with that, he hung up. WRLX, February 24, 2025, 2007. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand, the weight of his words sinking in. I knew what he meant. He wasn't bluffing. Gerald wasn't just some guy I could walk away from. He was a force, a dangerous one. And the game I thought I was playing? It was bigger than I could have ever imagined. The next few days were a blur. I could feel the walls closing in around me. Gerald's threats weren't idle. I started noticing things, small, subtle things. A few clients who had always been loyal to me suddenly stopped responding to my calls. People who had once respected me in the office now looked at me with suspicion, like they knew something was off but weren't sure what. The rumors started to spread. And then it hit me. Abigail wasn't just watching me anymore. She was actively working with Gerald, using her position to destroy me in ways I hadn't even seen coming. She wasn't just playing the victim anymore, she was the mastermind behind everything. She was manipulating everything behind the scenes, pulling strings in ways I couldn't see until it was too late. I had underestimated her. And now, I was paying the price. With every step I took, I felt more trapped. More isolated. And the more I tried to fight back, the deeper I sank into the web of lies and betrayal. And Samantha? She was caught in the middle of all of this. She was just as trapped as I was. I didn't know how much longer I could keep up this facade. Every day, I felt myself slipping further into something darker, something I couldn't control. But there was no turning back now. The stakes had been raised. And I was about to make a choice that would change everything. I could feel the pressure building. Every conversation with Abigail, every tense moment with Gerald, it was all starting to wear me down. My mind raced at all hours, replaying every interaction, every wrong move. The lies, the manipulation, the power plays. It felt like I was drowning in them, with no way out. Abigail's influence over me was suffocating. The way she would look at me, calm, calculating, like she knew I was stuck in her web and there was nothing I could do about it. It wasn't even about love anymore. It was about control. She didn't care about me as a person. She cared about keeping me where she wanted me, keeping me weak, keeping me attached to her, and ultimately, keeping me from escaping her grip. But Gerald was different. He was more ruthless. He wasn't playing games. He was dangerous, and he had the power to destroy everything. It was clear now that my entire life was hanging in the balance, and if I didn't act soon, I wouldn't just lose everything. I'd become another pawn in their twisted chess match. Samantha, though, she was the one thing I couldn't let go of. Even though everything had become a mess, even though I knew we were both playing with fire, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed her. She was the only person who didn't have an agenda. She wasn't using me. I wasn't using her. We were just two people, trying to make sense of a world that had gone completely wrong. But everything I did to try and fix it, everything I thought would free me, only seemed to make things worse. One night, everything came to a head. It was a Friday, and I had spent the entire day pretending like everything was normal, when in reality, I was barely holding it together. The whispers at the office had gotten louder, and people were starting to avoid me. Some of my closest friends, people I had trusted, had begun to distance themselves. I could feel the walls closing in around me. That night, I went home early. Abigail was already there, sitting on the couch, as if nothing was wrong. She looked at me with that same unreadable expression, her eyes calculating as always. I could tell she was waiting for me to break, waiting for me to give in. But I wasn't going to. Not anymore. I took a deep breath and decided it was time to confront her. There was no more avoiding it. I couldn't keep living like this, stuck between her and Gerald and the mess I had gotten myself into. Abigail, I said, my voice steady but cold. We need to talk. Right now. She didn't react at first, just looked at me like she was waiting for me to say something stupid. But I wasn't backing down. I know everything, I said, my eyes locking with hers. I know about you and Gerald. I know what you've been doing behind my back. The lies. The manipulation. It ends tonight. Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked almost pleased. It was like she had been expecting this moment, and now that it had come, she wasn't afraid. She knew I had no choice but to play her game, just like before. Do you? She asked softly, almost mockingly. Do you really know everything, Robert? Because I don't think you do. I think you still have no idea what you're up against. I stood there, stunned by her words. It was like she had just thrown a bucket of ice-cold water on everything I thought I understood. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I demanded. She stood up and walked slowly toward me, her heels clicking against the floor. Her gaze never left mine. You think this is all just about me and Gerald? She asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. You think it's that simple? No, Robert. It's bigger than that. You've been a pawn in this game since the day we met. You've been the one who thought he could control everything, but you've never had control. Not once. I felt a cold chill run through me. The walls were closing in faster now, and I could feel the grip tightening. Who else is involved? I asked, barely able to get the words out. She smiled then, a cold, calculated smile. You really think you can just walk away from this? You think you can get out of it without paying the price? It's too late for that, Robert. The people you've pissed off, Gerald, me, others you don't even know, they don't let people like you walk away. Not without consequences. The air felt thick. I could feel the weight of her words settling on me like a lead blanket. This wasn't just about her and Gerald anymore. This was something far darker, something I wasn't prepared for. What are you going to do? I asked, my voice breaking slightly as I finally admitted that I didn't have the answers. She tilted her head, studying me like a predator sizing up its prey. I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm going to make sure I get what I want. And if you're too weak to keep up, well, she shrugged nonchalantly, then you'll fall. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. It was clear now, Abigail had never intended to let me go. She wasn't going to just sit back and let me walk away from her, from the life we had built. She was going to make sure that if I left with nothing. No career. No reputation. No future. But then something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep playing her game. I couldn't keep walking this tightrope, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I didn't know what my next step would be, but I knew I couldn't stand by and let her control me any longer. And that was the moment I decided to fight back. The problem was, I had no idea just how far Abigail would go to win. The next few days felt like a blur, but I knew one thing, I was done. I couldn't keep living under Abigail and Gerald's thumb. I had to make a choice, and I knew it had to be now. If I waited any longer, there would be nothing left for me to fight for. I didn't know how much more I could lose. My career, my reputation, my sanity, it all felt like it was slipping away. But there was one thing left to hold on to, Samantha. As complicated as everything had become, she was the one thing that felt real, the one thing that wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game. I reached out to her. I knew the risks, but I didn't care anymore. I couldn't keep running from the truth. We met in secret, away from the prying eyes of Gerald and Abigail. The moment I saw her, I knew I had to tell her everything. I couldn't let her get caught in the same trap I was in. She deserved more than that. Samantha, I said, my voice trembling a little. I'm done. I'm done with Abigail. I'm done with Gerald. I don't care what they do anymore. I'm choosing you. Her eyes softened, but I could see the fear in them too. Robert, you don't know what you're getting into. Gerald won't let you go without a fight. He'll destroy everything you've worked for. I don't care, I said, cutting her off. I don't want to live like this anymore. If I have to lose everything to be free, then so be it. I'm not letting them control me any longer. She looked at me for a long moment before nodding, a silent understanding passing between us. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing the right thing. I wasn't playing anyone's game anymore. But Gerald wouldn't let it go. He wasn't done with me yet. A few days later, I received a message from him. His words were chilling. You think you can walk away from me, Robert? You think you can take everything I've worked for without consequence? You're making a mistake. But I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't backing down. I sent one final message back, do your worst. The next morning, I packed my things. Everything that had tied me to this life, the house, the job, the relationships, I walked away from it all. I left Abigail and Gerald to deal with their mess, and I walked out of their world. It wasn't easy. The consequences were immediate. I knew the fallout would come, but I didn't care. I was free. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of their manipulation hanging over me. And as for Samantha? She was right there with me, ready to start anew. We didn't know what the future held, but we were facing it together. No more lies. No more games. Just the two of us, trying to rebuild a life that was ours. In the end, I realized something important. It wasn't about the money, the power, or the control. It was about finding the strength to walk away from the things that held you captive. And sometimes, the only way to win is to stop playing.